information. I'll let you share your screen, Jared, and bring up the slides, and we can get going.
Sounds great.
Yeah, welcome everybody. And Jared's really going to drive this to Jason's point, we will frequently at Uncat get questions about cybersecurity. Every app vendor does, because security is super important. We have a very strong security stance, and that's really due to the fact that it's Jared's area of expertise. So we try to do the right things from an app perspective vis-a-vis security. And then, of course, through his experience, we also benefit a lot from just being able to try to help firms, firm owners, and their clients take on a very positive security stance. And so we figured we'd tap on Jared's expertise to be able to share a lot about what he knows and what he's learning every day in the field that hopefully will help you all to thrive in a firm environment, but also as individuals. So with that, welcome. If folks have any Uncat questions, feel free to tap those into Q&A as well. I'm sure you're familiar with us. You may be users or customers already. If you're not, and if you have uncategorized transactions or receipts or requests that you need to send to clients, get their responses to, we are the app for that. So uncat.com. But for now, we'll focus on cybersecurity. So Jared, over to you.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Brandon, for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here. As Brandon mentioned briefly, my background is in cybersecurity and really computer science. We started this company 5 years ago this next month, but prior to that, and still ongoing, I lead threat research at a multi-billion-dollar in terms of valuation, not revenue. It's a lot of revenue, hundreds of millions. Large security company that does vendor risk management. So we work with the big four accounting firms. We work with small companies. We work with kind of pretty much everyone when it comes to managing their cyber risk. And so, as Brandon mentioned, almost all of that gets applied back to the work we do at Uncat. So I do that for 8 hours a day, and then I do Uncat for another 6 to 8 hours a day, depending on the week. So I'm really excited to be here and talk to all of you guys. And I also teach pen testing at NYU, and I used to teach at my alma mater as well, specifically cybersecurity. So we're going to talk about today a lot of we'll get into some technical stuff, but for the most part, we'll try and keep it high level. And what are like the most basic security things you can do? And also a bit, I'll show a couple demos or of information that you might expect to see out there that's out in the dark web. And especially those that don't have a dedicated in-house IT or security team, or maybe you're working with someone like RightWorks if you're hosting QBO or QBD, or you're on Zero and have a trusted partner to manage your security. We'll be doing a webinar with Practice Protect coming up in October. That the whole company is cybersecurity for accounting firms, so they're a great person to talk to as well. First thing I want to start with, and I'd love to make this interactive. People can share chat, or I figure out how to send that through. Let's see. I'm going to start with, what do people think? At least just throw out some ideas. Can you still see my screen if I just share the slides? I'm trying not to.
Yeah,
Okay,
you can do slideshow.
Got it. What do people think are the at least two of the top weaknesses that lead to the compromise of both the largest and smallest organizations? See if I can pull up the Q&A. Oh, this is going to be fun. Brandon, can you read out to me what you're seeing there, because Zoom isn't wanting to show it to me?
Yeah, so if you click the Q&A tab at the bottom, but phishing emails is one that's come through.
Yep, phishing emails is big. Anything else people want to suggest? So phishing emails is great. Another piece of information, or another more helpful way to contextualize that can be stepping back from the technical cause and thinking about what is it that attackers are targeting. So being careless or inattentive, we all have 1,000 million things going on a daily basis. Phishing emails directly target that. And they're getting ever more sophisticated as well. I work a lot with large language models at Security Scorecard, and we're building models to accurately mimic threat actors. So the people that are actually hacking into people and convincing them that we are one of them, and then buying the data that they're selling illegally off of them in partnership with law enforcement, so that we know what credentials are out there. So even threat actors are vulnerable to being not cautious enough or inattentive to an email they get or a message they get on a forum. And the other piece is thinking you're not a target. So there was a time for at least multiple decades of cyber, going back to the mid thousands, where there were not enough people out there that were trying to hack into companies to make a difference for the smaller organizations, the firms with 2 or 3 clients or even a couple hundred clients. It wasn't lucrative enough. There wasn't enough time of the day. But the key piece is that there wasn't enough automation. That has all changed in the last few years, specifically the last 5 to 10. Most of the time that I've been in cyber, everything is automated, both from my perspective as a builder of systems to collect data on threat actors and what data is out there being leaked of our customers, but also from the perspective of the threat actors themselves. You can step back without not knowing how to code at all and click just literally a few buttons on the tools that these people build and find everything you need to know that's publicly leaked or on the dark web for a particular organization just based on email or a domain. And in the case of firms, it may not be that they're even trying to target your firm. They could be trying to target a client. And because that client's using the same password everywhere, they're then able to log into, say, their Uncat portal or their Dex portal or their QuickBooks login. We do our best to on our side to block those attempts when we see something that's suspicious, but there's so much ground to cover among all of the vendors that your clients use or that you use that it's not thinking that you could possibly be a target is really not the mindset anymore. Anita asks, I'll just step in and answer this question live. What steps should I take to protect client data on Teams? Teams in general, if you're talking about sharing access to Microsoft Teams for your clients to chat back and forth, there's one particular piece of using calls software like Zoom or Teams that's important, and you'll see. I don't know if you can see it in this Zoom session, but often when you go into a Zoom or a Teams, you'll see in the upper left, there's like a little icon that'll show whether the call is encrypted or not. And if there are if you're logged into Teams or Zoom and you're not signed in to the actual app, you're just joining as a guest, or you're joining from a phone or another device it's not secured, it'll tell you that. So one of the best ways you can protect sessions with Teams or Zoom is to make sure if you are inviting clients to it or other coworkers, that you make sure they have a dedicated account for it and that they're coming in only as an authenticated user. The other piece too, and this might go without saying, is that when you're using something like Teams or Slack or Zoom or Google Chat or any of those pieces of technology, you still want to be very careful to not share things like passwords and login details over those chats. Not because Microsoft has been hacked right now and they're taking that data and selling it, or they won't be hacked in the future. But because once they collect that information, they have to store it somewhere in their servers. And even if they're hacked in 4 years from now, and they still have the logs of that one time that your client sent over their bank account information over a Teams chat, hackers can get into that. And we've seen that happen with numerous breaches where years later, after somebody's using their account there, they're not even a customer of that app or service, but their bank account information is still the same. And it was in a message or a post or an email or something like that. So the best place to share data that's that sensitive would not be a typical Teams app or Zoom chat. It would be either one of two things. One, sending it over an encrypted email, which there's a number of ways to do that, but won't get into it here, but you can just look up like secure email clients or something like that. The second piece is to have a single service that you're using for sending back and forth sensitive documents, like a Dropbox or a box.com. And then when you're sending those documents back and forth, you can actually encrypt those files. So you can take a PDF file and you can password protect it. And that's something I would recommend doing if you're having them send back and forth bank information or personal PII that they need to use or that they need to share with you. That was a great question. Thank you, Anita. So cybersecurity is often something that's at the back of our minds. I mean, if you're not doing this every day, it's something you just don't worry about until something really bad happens. And that's really the whole problem with it, because there's a whole industry of people that are trying to sell solutions to make you more secure. And there's an even larger industry of criminal groups and threat actors and ransomware groups that are trying to monetize the ability to extract and hack that information. So it's just like if you're cleaning your house, you might not want to do that all at once, because if you don't do it for 8 months, it's going to be pretty hard to do it all in one day. Much like that with security, it's something you want to do over time. So you don't have to change every password that you've reused today, but every time you make a new account, generate a random password for that. I mean, the app I would recommend is 1Password, and we'll talk about this in a bit. 1Password is by far my favorite, but it's also the choice of most of the security community after LastPass got hit so many times. LastPass, I would not recommend that. They've proven time and time again they do not know what they're doing. But 1Password is what we use at Scorecard. People like Google use it. Anything like that is helpful. The other piece is if you're setting up like multi-factor authentication. And you don't have to do it on all your accounts today, but it's important that you must do that on accounts that are the most critical, like your bank, mortgages, legal sign-ins that you might have for your firm, certain computers that are sensitive, your Microsoft account if you're sharing spreadsheets, those sorts of things. Somebody asked what antivirus program is best to protect online and PC data. That's sort of like asking what type of car is the best one to drive. It depends. But I would always recommend starting with something that has an ability to start free from a trusted company and then scale your way up. So I think most people probably heard about the CrowdStrike breach, or not breach, it wasn't a breach, but the incident they had where they messed up a bunch of computers. I spoke on live TV about that the other day. If you live in Seattle and you watch the local Fox channel, then you may have seen me. But still, regardless, CrowdStrike Falcon Home is one of the best offerings in the market. They have a very solid solution, and it starts free, and you can scale up from there to multiple endpoints. The other company to look at, and I don't know if SentinelOne has home plan, but SentinelOne is another very, very solid cyber company. McAfee, that's kind of the old days at this point. McAfee itself even is now called Trellix, Trellix. If I'm picking a new EDR right now, it's going to be Sentinel, it's going to be CrowdStrike. We use CrowdStrike at Scorecard. Even large organizations and enterprises use that. Obviously, Delta. That wasn't a breach that caused that to happen. It was just that so many people were relying on that software that they made one pretty nasty mistake and they didn't mean to, and it bricked a bunch of computers. But regardless, that was just illuminating to show how many of the top organizations are being protected and how many of the smaller companies that weren't having issues because of that weren't protecting themselves whatsoever. So I think SentinelOne and CrowdStrike are honestly some of the best. There's 1,000 bazillion ones out there. But the other thing I'd say too is that you don't want to fall for scams when it comes to protecting your computer, and you've got to be so careful about that. Because somebody can register a domain, like let's take Uncat, for example. We know Uncat is at uncat.com, right? You all would know this brand. We have that domain. But if you let's assume I'm a hacker and I'm trying to sell you Uncat. And so, but I know that you might know the brand, so you might be willing to share some information back with me. Well, and I haven't actually checked this. I'd love to demo in my own thing. Yeah, there you go. Uncat with 2A's.com is not taken. So while that would still fall under a trademark and it would be illegal to use that, or it would be, we would go to court over it. A threat actor could buy this domain for $10 a year. And if they know you're an Uncat customer, they could craft an email that looks like Brandon and they can send it, and I would know nothing about it. Periodically, I go through and buy these domains, but most organizations don't really follow this. So what happened with CrowdStrike is right after that attack, and this can apply to any software companies. This is very generic advice that people don't talk about a lot from a cyber perspective. So hopefully it's helpful here. But oh no, I have a New York Times account, but I don't know. It's not going to let me show that. I was just going to show you guys where the domains that people were buying. CrowdStrike scams domains. Give me a second. Oh, here we go. Yes. So literally, as soon as this happened, people started registering, bad people started registering hundreds of domains that looked like CrowdStrike, but were not actually them. So Akamai actually published this report here. And I wish they would show me some example. Here we go. Perfect. The list is available here. So all of these emails, let me blow this up. So somebody registered CrowdStrike bluescreen.com and then started emailing CrowdStrike customers saying, hey, do you need help fixing this issue? We're here to help. You go to that site though, you put your payment information in and they're gone. They're going to drain your account and you're out of money if you messed up in that case. Or if you put your login information to CrowdStrike, even worse, they're going to be able to have that access. Or maybe it says sign in with your Microsoft 365 so we can log into the Windows computer and fix it. That's even worse because now they have control over your entire Microsoft domain. So this kind of stuff happens all the time. And so just long way of answering that antivirus question, you want to be careful anytime you use any software because domains are easy to buy and threat actors love to masquerade as someone that's real to make it seem like they're a real entity when they're not. And that was a great question for whoever asked it. I know we kind of went around the bush there, but please, if anyone has more questions, you have me this whole time, and my hourly rated scorecard is extremely expensive, and this is free. So use the time wisely, or you can always email Uncat, and then I'm just going to reply to your email regardless if you have a security question. So one thing that people or that threat actors will often do is pivoting. You can think of that as if they know that your firm is called, fancybookkeeping.com. They start with some base set of information, and then they're going to find like different paths they can go from there. And so if they get from that website and then they find the client portal you have, they've pivoted to there. And now if they can find the clients that you have, which might be on your website, you might have like a logo of a major client. They can then go to LinkedIn, find the owner of that company, find their name, find maybe their birthday and month, maybe not year, and then find recent posts they made about certain information that might be relevant. And then they can start to basically shove passwords in that client portal until they find one that was actually theirs. The problem that we're facing as a community is that everyone still in 2024 doesn't understand that password security is like the number one thing you can do when it comes to protecting yourself. Just relatively recently dealt with an incident where one of our customers was using the same password across a lot of very critical services, and that led everything to go from one payment provider and then jump around to like 10 different other services they were using, going from one to one, draining accounts. And that's not great, all because the same password is used. So I want to be very clear that like if you can do anything, it's not sharing passwords, because when threat actors are pivoting around the network or around certain services, they're going to use that. Once they take over an admin account, it's pretty much game over from there. So as a security person, I mean, every single day, I look at the work I have to do to protect my customers, and then I go from there and I look at what are the types of surface they're exposing. So if you're a firm, you might have a website, then your public-facing website, you might have a client portal, then you've got these 10 apps that you're using for your customers. And then you have all of your spreadsheets and things for tracking prices over here in Microsoft. And then finally, maybe there's 20 computers among all of your staff, or maybe it's just you and someone else, so two, that are logged into all of these services. So all of that I just described, I'd consider your digital footprint. So that's all of your publicly and non-publicly kind of attack surface that somebody can come after. And another thing to do if you're looking just to protect your firm is just maintaining an inventory of all the stuff that you have. When you hire new employees, make it very clear that, hey, these are the services we use. We don't use other services. So don't go and be downloading our documents and putting them in your own personal Dropbox or your own Google Drive, just so it's easier for you to access it remotely at home. maybe the answer there is get them a laptop to take home that's controlled by your network and not via their own device. Because what happens if that laptop is stolen? What happens if they get malware in their computer at home and then all that data gets out into the dark web? It only takes one single valid password to log into someone's account. And then from there, if there's not multi-factor authentication, you're pretty much hosed at that point. Once you know the digital footprint, it's about identifying those areas and ways you can put defenses in place, like I mentioned. So having some kind of endpoint tool, a CrowdStrike, Falcon, a SentinelOne, Trellix, it's the newer McAfee. And then other things like making sure that I know where all of my software is, who all of my vendors are, and then asking those vendors, what are they doing to protect my data? So we often get at Uncat questions from larger firms to send us, they'll send us assessment questionnaires for us to answer all of the kind of security questions about how we handle a network, how do we handle passwords, how do we handle data. And so we fill those out pretty often for those large firms. And then once we do it for one or two and someone else wants a similar version, we'll send them the same thing and we update that yearly. So you as an organization can do the same thing of your own vendors. If you're working with a new app, great question to ask them would be, hey, how are you securing my data? Do you save our QuickBooks data yourself, or do you only call their APIs? What is your handling of new users? Do you have MFA? Those sorts of things are all great questions to ask the new people that you're looking to kind of include in your software stack. So we've talked about a lot of this already, what you can specifically do to mitigate the risk that we all sort of face. So password management is it's still number one. This hasn't changed. Using something like 1Password is probably the best recommendation I can give you. It's cheap. You can use it for your whole firm for like 10 to 20 people at most, that's going to be a couple $100s a month. For just you, it's going to be like $20 and you can add your family to it. It's not about changing everything at once. It's about changing passwords that are for very critical services. And even things that you think might be safe, like my dog's name, a year, 3 symbols, and a number. If any of those things share some pattern, there's a good chance that they're already out there. And that's the scary part. So like one of the main lists that people use is this list called RockU. So this might not even be the full one, but let me just get into this is not the best one. Here we go. This is better. Oh, I have to oh wow. Yeah, this is going to be a big file. Let me see if I can get a better, here we go, strong passwords. That'll work. So these are literally passwords that are exposed just on GitHub, which is a file sharing service for like developers, that are being used to put into services that people own. So what hackers will do is they'll find things that you use, and then they'll find, again, all they need is the username or the email of someone they know as a customer, and then they just take all these passwords and they just run them through it over and over. This is why with Uncat, if somebody hits our login screen more than 5 times in a matter of seconds, I lock them out for another 30 minutes. If they do it again, I lock them out for a day. If they do it again after that, they're just banned. Because any app or service should do this, but not all of them do. So I mean, these passwords, a lot of them look strong, like 1, 2, 3 exclamation point @ That's just going down the row of numbers, and then the next row. These are all already out there, so that's why random passwords. None of these are random because they all have some kind of pattern. So even this EDC one is the # and then down on your keyboard EDC, and then the same thing over from CVF going back up. It's not hard to find these things, and so if you're going to do one single thing, it would just be to make sure your passwords are completely and totally random. So as like an example, I'll show you. Let me see if I can find. I'm not sharing this yet. I have to clear out my screen. Okay, here we go. Let me share something different. Share. Okay. Hey, Brandon, can you see 1Password?
Yeah, it's showing.
Okay. So this is 1Password. I'm not going to show you guys any of my logins, but this will autofill on different services you use. So you don't have to manually set this up every time. It will suggest it. But just as an example, when you create a new password, you can choose up to 100 characters. You can go anywhere in here. You can do numbers, symbols, whatever. And if you save it once and you put your, your username in, there's my Gmail, I can save it and it will fill into the sites that use it. It'll automatically put the domain here when you make a new account on a certain service. And even beyond that, you can do like memorable passwords here. And if I regenerate this every time, these are going to be completely random combinations, but honestly, I don't even like these. There are a lot of people that like this, but most hardcore security practitioners don't really recommend this. And then you can even get PIN codes too. So highly recommend 1Password. It's a great tool. Let me go back to sharing slides. Here we go. Multi-factor authentication, that's extremely important. Like with Uncat, we have an option to do that for some people. We don't have it by default because a lot of clients, they kind of struggle with it. But that's just a thing as an industry that we need to solve and solve better. But when you're doing multi-factor authentication, it's kind of two pieces. It's one, it's putting on your most valuable accounts first, and then two, it's not using SMS or text passwords. Why is that the case, Jared? Well, all I have to do is call AT&T and pretend to be you, and I can get your phone number put on my phone. I can do that for any single cellular service. You might be like, how? That should be illegal. Well, it's illegal, but it can be done very easily. And so it really just takes a Google search like why SMS is yeah, literally Google's already suggesting why SMS 2FA is bad. There's articles going back years now, and even on Reddit. Using SMS as two-factor auth is no safer than two-factor auth because it's that comment's kind of stupid. But the point I'm trying to make, and you can see here, I think this one's probably making it, is the fact that you can compromise SMS. And on top of that, it's not always completely random. So as an example of something that's completely random, I would get when you see MFA, like an app like Google Authenticator, for those that don't use it, this would be a suggested app that you could use, or you can just get the Google Authenticator app. I'll show you an image of it. And it's going to look like this. It's going to generate the random codes. You're going to scan a QR code, and even 1Password will actually automatically find that on your screen. So multi-factor auth is great. You should absolutely have it everywhere if you can, anywhere that supports it, but at least on the biggest places. Because what that means is if somebody does compromise one of these passwords and they do find a gap through you or your clients, they still are not going to be able to get past the multi-factor authentication step, and then you're still safe. The other thing to do on this point number 3, the one thing I want to highlight is that if you have an IT provider or you manage your domain yourself, I'm assuming you might have a domain in your website through like a GoDaddy or a Squarespace or one of those. But even if you do it yourself, the thing you should be adding are this keyword here, SPF and DMARC. So what SPF and DMARC do in a nutshell, and they've only been around for, I say they've only been around, they've probably been around since like the 80s or 90s. I'd have to look it up. But they've really only been used the last couple decades. What they do is they prevent somebody from sending an email to someone else using your domain without getting your permission first. Believe it or not, without having these records configured on your domain, which domains do not come with those by default, if you're set up to use email, but you don't have those records, you can literally send an email as that person's domain. And that's perfect for me because I don't even need to register Uncat with 2 A's. I just go and I register kpmg.com and I email one of their clients and ask them to pay their invoice. KPMG has SPF. That's something they put in a long time ago, but most small businesses do not implement that. And that's a huge thing that's pretty easy to do. Patty asked about Keeper. That's what we used to use 1Password as scorecard. We transitioned to Keeper more recently because it was cheaper. Keeper security is great. Not the Keeper that's our competitor, but Keeper Security. Keeper Security is a very solid service. I mean, it's a little bit, the UI is not as friendly as 1Password, but from their actual security protocol and how they do it is as strong, if not stronger than 1Password. I'm big fans of both of them. Like my CISO at Security Scorecard, he used to be the CISO for Marvel, like Marvel that made the movies. And then before that was the CISO at another massive technology company, and he loves Keeper Security and uses it for his family. And then when they came and offered us a discount to switch from 1Password, we did that. So absolutely, that Keeper Security is a great app. I think the one just to stay away is like LastPass. At least right now, they kind of have a bad rep. And on that same note, if you're ever like on at the App Store or somewhere else and you see an app that's like free VPN, virtual private network to hide your IP, or like free whatever, do not use any security tool that is free. Like that's another piece of advice. If you're not paying like at least $10 a month or $5 a month or something for a security tool you're using, it's not free, though it is to your credit card. What they're doing is they're either selling your data or they're selling your IP and letting that be used for someone else. So as an example, VPN, proxy, scams, these were actually being used by, what was this? Proxy botnet. Let me see if I can find a good example. Oh, here we go. This is it. So this 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 announcement was literally just this year. We work at FBI, didn't work with them on this, but this service 911S5, they were getting VPN IPs off of people they had gotten to download free apps from the App Store. Like, secure your browser right now, use this free app. It's private, whatever. People didn't have to pay for it, but what they were doing is they were taking those IPs. So whenever you ran the software on your computer or your phone, they would then sell access to your IP address to people that do web crawling or scams or scraping or any of those like cyber related things. They would sell that to people on the dark web, and they would basically just offer up your internet connection to these people. So while you aren't paying anything to be secure and private, and while it is true that you aren't using your own home IP or using the IP of this VPN, they were actually just going completely around that and using those people's IPs to sell it as access to get around like login portals and all of that. So that piece of advice there is, if you're getting something for free and it's a cyber tool, you should not be using it. I mean, just drop the mic, don't do it. Unless it's like, you're using Chrome and it's Google, then that's different. We all know Google's has their issues with selling data, but those I don't worry about as much. I worry about this smaller kind of not startups necessarily, but apps that claim to do something for you for free to make you more secure, but don't want anything in return and aren't well known. Those are something you should stay away from. Was a free version of CrowdStrike recommended or better to pay? CrowdStrike falls in that bucket of like Google. Like, I use Google Chrome. I don't pay them anything. I know that they're going to take my data and do things with it. I have the settings in there to not disable cookies where needed. CrowdStrike, I think, might have like an initial free plan or like a very cheap tier. That's totally fine to use that. And that was someone asked that question just for context. So that rule really only applies if it's not like an extremely well-known brand. It's like if you're let me think of another example. I mean, utilities like Chrome and all of that stuff is fine, or CrowdStrike. But if it's a random app that you see that's offering free VPN or free password manager, probably not a good idea. And yeah, while we're on this, we can look at, I think their main product is called CrowdStrike Falcon, and so they have a home, and they have a business version too. It's either one, yeah, home usage edition. Falcon Prevent. That's the one. So Falcon Prevent, and then they have another one for businesses as well. But frankly, both of these are solid. Like at Scorecard, we pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to CrowdStrike. You're not going to pay anywhere near that because you don't have like 200,000 machines to protect. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. And then last and most not most important, but definitely one of the most important is making sure everything is up to date. You'll see in your browser, like up here, that if you go, it'll say, relaunch to update. You always want to click that stuff. You always want to update your core tools because companies are constantly having to update fix bugs in software because bugs just happen. And it's not like a bug that we would, get an Uncat where it's like, oh, it's a kind of a pain in the butt. Jared's got to go deal with it. If we've never had a security incident, nor have we had a vulnerability that's been exploited. But say there was one day, I'm able to update that myself automatically because there's no software on your computer for Uncat. But Chrome, when they have security issues, they can't update it for you automatically. You've got to actually go into here. And so the interesting thing is Chrome will automatically tell you if it has like a critical update by putting it up here, or you can set it to automatically update. In this case, I was already on pretty much the newest version, but it's just updating to a smaller, like we call it a hot fix, like a small feature here or there. If you ever see a notification like security update, you always want to apply those as soon as you can. Again, I know CrowdStrike, their whole thing, it was a security update. Hopefully the whole community will learn from that, but this advice doesn't change just because of that. How often should you update passwords? It depends, once again. To be totally honest with you, I'm a security person. I have a PhD in computer science, cybersecurity. I don't update my passwords for any of my non-critical services pretty much ever. Like for example, my Reddit login. I don't use Reddit that much other than just to look at things. I've never updated it since I first made it. But when I first made it, I used a random password, one password. But my bank, my Uncat passwords, our Uncat passwords, as an example, are rotated at least once a year for our personal accounts, but on our cloud accounts that actually run all of the infrastructure that have data like yours, those are rotated every 3 to 6 months, depending on the access controls on it. So it's you want to do it generally more often for your critical accounts, but if it's stuff like that you're not worried about, then you don't need to update it that often or at all if it's not if it's already random. Password rotation is only necessary when the password gets leaked, but it's always good hygiene to rotate them for the most critical services. And then again, MFA is key too. It's multi-layer defense. If you think about cybersecurity or like breaking into a castle, you've got to get over the moat, you've got to get over the drawbridge, and you got to avoid all the arrows they're shooting at you. Then you got to get to the inner castle wall. And so for a long time, security has been and still is thought of like defense in depth, and that's the word. So I've got defense at multiple levels of depth. And for you all as firms, I mean, defense in depth is really, do you know what the software you're using is? Like everyone in your firm, make sure everyone's using the same stuff. Is everything being updated? Do I have my passwords in shape for at least the major services that are important? Do we have MFA enabled and everything that we can, especially the critical stuff like Microsoft accounts, Teams, that sort of thing? And then finally, another just one that you probably won't hear a lot from most because it doesn't get talked about a lot, but it should, is SPF and DMARC. So you want to protect against phishing as best as you can. And if you tell that to your IT person that you've worked with, hey, I want you to add SPF and DMARC to my domain. First things first, it can cause issues if it's not set up correctly, but it's really easy to set it up right as well. Just something to look into for after this. Let's see. Last couple things, phishing and security awareness training for your team is always helpful. KnowBe4 is a good company. I think they have even some free stuff. It is who we use as a security scorecard. So KnowBe4 basically just teaches you what phishing emails look like, and you can even simulate phishing campaigns. Last couple things, if you're really big business, like some of our largest firms, they do have cyber insurance. Not super necessary for a smaller firm, not really necessary at all. It just depends on what your risk perspective is. But for our largest firms, they do. And then I mentioned this earlier, you can do this as a small firm. You can ask your vendors when you start to work with them, hey, can you send me a copy of your latest cake? It's CAIC, that's a security controls report. Or you can ask them, hey, do you have any SOC certifications? Even if you don't, can you just tell me that you at least abide by them. Those types of questions are good. And then finally, having somebody from your managed like IT team that knows something about security is important. So I live in a city called Knoxville with Brandon, Knoxville, Tennessee. And the city was hit by ransomware a few years ago. And the first thing they did was they reached out to the IR team, the incident response team they had on retainer, which was a very large security company. And they were there. They had flown people out there within the day to start digging in and fixing things. So you can get this same type of service from pretty much anybody that provides your IT infrastructure, and it's not going to be that expensive if you're a small firm. But it's just like having a lawyer on retainer for your firm or knowing a lawyer you can call. This is a good contact to have as well. So I think we can end there. If anyone has more questions, throw them out. I'd love to take them. And of course, if you're not using Uncat, please use it. I'd go as far as saying it's probably the most secure app out there. Maybe not so much as Intuit because they've got like 1,000 people working on it, but Intuit does audit our security every year, so I feel pretty good about it. And yeah, and it looks like Brandon, are we doing the Starbucks thing? I guess now that it says it, we kind of got to do it for this.
Special, a special webinar promo. It's exciting.
Special webinar promo.
Who doesn't like a coffee? Yeah, if there's any other questions, pop them into Q&A. How do we know?
Yes.
So here's one, just sort of a general overarching question, which is how would someone know if they had personally identifiable information or other information for that matter that had been stolen? Where would they search?
This is a free website. You can see my screen, Brandon?
Yep.
So you can literally put your email in here and then you can actually go to notify me. And this, I say free. Again, this is one that I trust because it's by a extremely reputable person called Troy Hunt. And he literally he works at Microsoft. So like literally he's fine. But you can go in here and I'll put in my email as an example, my Gmail. And it has been in breaches because you can't really avoid this because when you sign up for services and they lose your data, you can't do anything about it. You can change your passwords. It's called have up here, have I, just the one I, Ben Pwned, PWEND. I'll see, can I put that? Let me see if I put, okay, I can type the answer under here. Have I been pwned.com. If I'm any of you all in here, put this on your go here, log or put your email in and have it notify you for all your main emails. This is free. You can pay for other services. And even 1Password, as an example, in Keeper Security as well, will actually notify you if your data has been leaked because they have your emails too. Any of those are good. And so you can see here, Advanced Auto Parts just leaked my email because that's the freaking email I use for my car stuff. AT&T, I use AT&T. Chegg, that was something I used when I was in school about a decade ago. MyFitnessPal, I use MyFitnessPal and I used to run a lot. So you can see for each one of these what the data that was compromised was. And in general, you just want to look for passwords. And if you see that passwords is there, you just want to go make sure that this email for that particular site has had the password reset. And typically they will email you. But again, this is why reusing passwords is so bad because even resetting your password on AT&T let's see, on MyFitnessPal is not enough because now that it's been out in the dark web, they'll then take that password and email and they'll find every other service that you use and try that same password. And if you use the same one, you're screwed at that point. That's why password reuse is not great. How do you prove or show you have good security in place to your prospective clients? There's a lot of ways to do that, but one thing is those assessments. So take survey. What we do, let's see if I can find. Brandon, am I missing how this is spelled? Oh, it's a Q. Sorry, it's a Q. Take. So you can take these questionnaires and you let's go to the new version and it will go through a bunch of questions. They'll ask you, have you secured this? Do you have a backup policy in place for this or that? and you can fill it out on your own for free and then send that to your clients. Even if they don't request it specifically, this is one of the more industry standard ones that you can use that is free. Another thing you can do is if you really are a big firm, then you could use Security Scorecard. We have a free plan. There's a free trial. You guys are, some of you may be too small for it, but there are others that are cheaper. But you can look at going to this an ad. But there are certain companies that now do. They're called trust portals. So you can, and Vanta is going to be, again, a little more expensive one, but some of them have free plans. And what you can do is, I'll go and show you here. Here's Cisco's. No, that's not the one. We'll do Palantir Trust Portal. You can go to here. SafeBase is another company that does this. And so see here, this Palantir literally is published. They say, okay, we've got audit logging in place. We have reports for our network. They're basically saying we know what our network looks like. You can see here they've done the cake. That's a good one to start with for you all. They have cyber insurance, and here's all of their compliance. So they're SOC 1, 2, 3. They're FedRAMP moderate. Palantir is one of the largest companies or software companies in the world. That's why they have all of this. You don't need to have all of this, but you can basically build a little portal like this on your website is a good way to prove it. How better is 1Password than LastPass? Yash was asking. They both provide the same functionality. So it's not that I think LastPass wasn't great. I used to use it a long time ago. I'm just referring to the multiple times that they got the multiple times that they had issues. So like it got so bad there that they took their company private, or sold, or the company that bought them sold it off because the company was doing so bad after they got hit. And one big piece of the problem was that they weren't encrypting passwords that they were saving. And that's like a huge no-no. So if 1Password gets breached, I am totally fine. Or if Cybersecurity is breached, I'm still totally fine. Even though they store all those passwords, that's the thing. They don't actually store all the passwords. They either encrypt them on their side, or in the case of Cybersecurity, which is different than 1Password, Cybersecurity doesn't store anything in their cloud. 1Password does, but they store everything totally encrypted behind your master password. So they're both fine. And honestly, Ash, maybe it's okay to use it now. It's just kind of a nitpick thing that I have, but it's more important they're using something, and they're using something that's not like one of those free tools that isn't a well-known one. So if you're going to choose LastPass over no password manager, that's still totally fine. It's just about having something in place that's reputable. Hopefully that helped. Brandon, did you was your question the one or did you read off of the ones from the open questions?
Yeah, I think you answered those, and I think you did speak to sort of the different password management apps, namely 1Password, LastPass, Keeper, etc. So I think you've answered all the open questions.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you guys will have fun. Go to Have I Been Pwned and put your email in. And I'm scared to do my Uncat email. Well, why not? I like demos. I don't think it's been breached. Boom. My Uncat email is not breached, but I could put in I will. Here's the thing. Here's a fun one. I'll put my mom's email in because I know for a fact that she's been all over the place and she's in 17 different data breaches. So just that email's been around. She's had that email for like 15 years at this point. So your data's out there. That's why using random passwords, multi-factor authentication, and as a firm, doing a few of the things we talked about. So DMARC, SPF, making sure there's an update policy in place. Backups are important. I mean, it sounds like a lot of chores, but honestly, you will be so happy if anything happens and your business doesn't grind to a halt for what could be weeks or even longer. So it's not scary out there. It seems like it is, but if you care about it and you just put a little bit of time into it, you're so much better off than most people. What should you do after you know our passwords have been breached? That was one thing I was mentioning earlier. If you know the site that it was breached on, then obviously reset the password there. Second thing you want to do is you want to make sure that password wasn't reused anywhere. And if it was, you change that password everywhere else as well. So that's typically what happens is if you share the same password, like say you share the password between like your Airbnb app or your Lyft app and your bank account. If Lyft is hit tomorrow and their passwords were leaked and they weren't encrypted, like if they screwed something up on their side, now those threat actors are going to take those Lyft passwords and emails and they're going to go password spray, basically spray and pray. They're going to go look at all these other online sites and try those logins there. And if they find the bank account that you have that uses the same password combo, they're in at that point. Not because the bank was breached, but because you use the same password from a breached site, and because it was breached, it means the hackers have your data. It's just that simple. That's another reason why multi-factor authentication is important, because even if they get your bank password, most banks, I mean, all of them now have multi-factor authentication. If you're at a bank that doesn't have like if you're at a bank with an online website and they don't have MFA, then you should not be with that bank. I'm pretty sure it's illegal not to have it at this point, given like the regulatory standards. But you want to turn that on. That's very important because even if they have your password, they're not going to get past the MFA. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for attending. I love the questions, very interactive. We're here. Shoot me an email, jared@uncat.com, brandon@uncat.com. Thanks Brandon and Jason for putting this together today. And thank you everyone for joining. And please
Thanks,
sign up if
everybody.
you haven't already.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Great job. Thanks, everybody.